The Valtraxian ship came out of hyperspace like a silver knife cutting through black cloth. It was beautiful in a cold way, all sharp edges and gleaming metal. The ship moved toward the neutral station that floated in the empty space between stars, where species from across the galaxy came to meet and talk. Ambassador Kelvron stood at the front of his delegation, watching through the viewing window as the station grew larger. His body was more machine than flesh now. Chrome-plated arms caught the starlight. Yes. His eyes had been replaced long ago, with optical sensors that could see heat, radiation, and 100 other things organic eyes could never detect. A computer processor sat where half his brain used to be, letting him think faster than any natural mind. Behind him stood 12 other Valtraxians, each one showing off their own upgrades. General Thaxter had arms that could lift a ground vehicle. Specialist Miratek had reflexes so fast she could catch a bullet. Their bodies hummed with power cells and clicked with mechanical joints. For 3,000 years, the Valtraxians had been the most powerful species in this part of the galaxy. They believed the secret to their success was simple. They had learned to replace their weak flesh with strong metal. Every Valtraxian child received their first upgrade at birth. By the time they became adults, very little of their original body remained. They looked down on species that stayed organic. Such species were primitive, they thought. Foolish, afraid to become something better. When the human ship appeared from the jump point, Kelvorn felt something close to amusement. The vessel was small and simple compared to Valtraxian designs. His sensors scanned it automatically, and what he found made him feel sorry for whatever creatures lived inside. Almost entirely organic. No neural implants. No synthetic organs. No metal bones or computer-enhanced brains. Just soft, weak, biological bodies that could be hurt by a strong wind. Fascinating, General Thaxter said, his voice coming from a speaker in his throat. They have achieved space travel with almost no cybernetic enhancement. I did not think such a thing was possible. It shows determination, I suppose, Kelvorn replied. Like watching an animal build a dam. Impressive for what it is, but nothing compared to true engineering. The human ship docked with the station, and Kelvorn led his delegation to the meeting area. The room was large and plain, designed to make no species feel more at home than another. Bright lights shone from the ceiling. The air was kept at a temperature comfortable for most carbon-based life forms. The door on the far side opened. The humans walked in. Kelvorn's first thought was how small they were. Tallest among them barely reached his chest. Their skin was soft and easily damaged. Their eyes were simple organs that could only see a narrow band of light. They moved slowly compared to Valtraxian standards, their biological muscles working inefficiently. The woman at the front had brown hair pulled back from her face and eyes that were a shade of green. Voron's sensors identified as uncommon among her species. She walked with confidence, her back straight, her gaze steady. I am Captain Lisa Grant, she said. This is Dr. Samuel Park, our xenobiologist, and Commander Derek Cole, head of security. Gelveron studied them. The doctor was a smaller man with dark hair and a thoughtful expression. The security commander was larger, with broad shoulders and arms that showed evidence of physical training. But even he was soft compared to the weakest Valtraxian. Welcome to civilized space, Kelvorn said. I am Ambassador Kelvorn of the Valtraxian Dominion. We have watched your species with interest since you first began transmitting signals beyond your home planet. We're honored to meet you, Lisa said. This is an important day for humanity. Kelvorn noted that she showed no fear. His sensors detected elevated heart rate and slight perspiration, signs of excitement or stress, but her voice remained calm. Her companions were equally composed. This was unexpected. Most organic species became nervous when facing Valtraxian superiority. Perhaps they simply did not understand what they were seeing. I notice your people have not embraced cybernetic enhancement, Kelvorn said, gesturing to his own gleaming body. This is unusual for a species that has achieved interstellar travel. Most civilizations reach our level of technology long before they reach the stars. Samuel stepped forward slightly. We've developed the technology, he said. Simply choose not to use it on such a wide scale. Choose? General Thaxter sounded confused. Why would anyone choose to remain limited? We don't see it as limited, Samuel replied. We see it as different. The Veltraxians exchanged glances. Their internal communication implants buzzed with private messages, each one expressing some form of amusement or disbelief. These humans were like children who refused to grow up. Clinging to their primitive forms out of fear or ignorance, Kelveron decided to be generous. First contact situations required diplomacy after all, and it was not the humans' fault they were born into inferior bodies. Perhaps we can help you understand the benefits of enhancement, he said. We have much to teach your species if you are willing to learn. Lisa smiled. It was a small expression, just a slight curve of her lips, but Kelveron's sensors detected something in it that his processors could not quite identify. It almost looked like she knew something he did not. We're always willing to learn, she said. And perhaps we have some things to teach as well. General Thaxter made a sound that might have been a laugh, if his voice synthesizer had been capable of such a thing. What could organics possibly teach the Veltraxian Dominion? You might be surprised, Commander Derek Cole said. It was the first time he had spoken, and his voice was low and calm. We've been surprising people for a long time. Kelvern studied the security commander more closely. The man stood relaxed, his hands at his sides, his posture unthreatening. But there was something in his eyes, something the ambassador's advanced sensors could detect but not explain. It was a look Kelvoran had seen before, long ago, before his original eyes had been replaced. It was the look of someone who had faced death and won. We shall see, Kelvoran said finally. We have arranged quarters for your delegation. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, we will begin formal discussions about your place in the galactic community. Our place? Lisa raised an eyebrow. Every species has a place in the hierarchy, Kelvoran explained patiently. Based on their capabilities and achievements, we will help you understand where humanity belongs. The humans exchanged looks among themselves. Samuel seemed amused. Derek seemed like he was trying not to laugh. Lisa just smiled that strange smile again. We look forward to it, she said, as the humans were led away to their quarters. Kelveron stood in the meeting room, processing what had just occurred. The interaction had not gone quite as expected. The humans should have been awed, nervous, eager to please their obvious superiors. Instead, they had seemed almost confident. As if they knew something the Veltraxians did not, General Thaxter stepped up beside the ambassador. What do you make of them? Kelvoran considered the question carefully. His processors ran through thousands of possible analyses. I think, he said slowly, that they are more interesting than I first assumed. But interesting does not mean dangerous. They are still just organics. Tomorrow we will show them what true advancement looks like, and they will understand their place. Doxor nodded his metal head, and if they do not, Kelvoran's chrome face could not smile. But something in his voice came close. Then we will teach them. That is what superior species do. In their quarters on the other side of the station, Lisa Grant stood at the window, looking out at the stars. Derek and Samuel stood behind her. They think we're weak, Derek said quietly. I know, Lisa replied. They're going to try to put us in our place, I know that too. Samuel crossed his arms. Should we be worried? Lisa turned from the window. Her green eyes caught the starlight, and for a moment, she looked like someone who had faced impossible odds before and smiled. No, she said. I think the Veltraxians are the ones who should be worried. They just don't know it yet. Outside, the stars burned cold and bright, watching as two very different species prepared to discover what strength really meant. The next morning, Ambassador Kelveron gathered everyone in the station's main arena. The room was large, built for training exercises and demonstrations. Bright lights hung from the ceiling. The floor was made of some material that could absorb impacts without breaking. It is tradition, Kelvorn explained to the human delegation, for established species to demonstrate their capabilities to newcomers. This helps everyone understand the natural order of things. Lisa stood with her arms crossed. The natural order? Yes, every species has strengths and weaknesses. These demonstrations help us measure them accurately. Kelveren's optical sensors focused on her. We mean no offense. We simply believe in honesty about such matters. No offense taken, Lisa said. What did you have in mind? Kelvorn gestured to the arena. Simple trials. Tests of strength, speed, intelligence, and combatability. Nothing dangerous. Merely a way to establish baseline capabilities. Derek stepped forward. And if we decline, then we would assume your species already knows its limitations. The ambassador's voice carried no threat, only what he considered to be simple fact. There is no shame in recognizing where one falls in the hierarchy. The humans looked at each other. Derek raised an eyebrow. Samuel shrugged. Lisa nodded slowly. We accept, she said. The Veltraxians seemed pleased. They had done this many times before with other organic species. The results were always the same. The organics would struggle and fail. Then they would understand their place beneath Veltraxian superiority. The first test was strength. General Thaxter stepped onto a platform in the center of the arena. His hydraulic arms gleamed under the lights. His body was a masterpiece of engineering, designed for power and endurance. He gripped a device that would measure his force output. I will demonstrate what enhanced strength looks like, he announced. His servos whined. His hydraulics pumped. The measurement device registered his output, 12,000 kilograms of sustained force, enough to crush a small vehicle, enough to punch through solid metal. The Veltraxians nodded in approval. This was what true power looked like. Now, Kelvorn said, turning to the humans, would any of you like to attempt the same test? There was a moment of silence. Then a woman stepped forward from the back of the human group. Her name was Maria Santos. She was small, barely reaching Thaxter's chest plate, with dark hair tied back in a simple braid. Her arms were defined with muscle, but they were still just flesh and bone. The Veltraxians exchanged amused glances through their communication implants. This tiny organic wanted to compare herself to General Thaxter. Maria stepped onto the platform and gripped the measurement device. She took a deep breath. Then another. Her muscles tensed. Veins stood out against her brown skin. She pulled. The device registered her output, 800 kilograms. A fraction of Thaxter as a result. The Veltraxians made sounds of satisfaction. This was the expected outcome, but Samuel was watching something else. He noticed that Thaxter's body was still venting excess heat from his effort. The general's power cells had dropped by 30% from that single demonstration. It would take him nearly an hour to fully recharge. Maria, on the other hand, was already breathing normally again. Her heart rate was returning to baseline. Within 5 minutes, she could perform the same test at the same level. Samuel filed this observation, away for later. The next test was speed and reflexes. Specialist Miratek stepped forward. Her body was optimized for quick movement, her joints designed for minimum friction, her neural pathways enhanced for instant reaction. A series of lights would flash in random patterns, and she would have to touch them as quickly as possible. The test began. Miratek was a blur of motion, her hands striking each light within milliseconds of it appearing. Her final score was nearly perfect. Her average reaction time measured at 0.003 seconds. Derek volunteered for the human attempt. He was fast for an organic. His reaction time measured at 0.15 seconds. Compared to Miratek, he was moving in slow motion. The Veltraxians nodded to themselves. Another expected result. But Derek was watching Miratek carefully. He noticed things her sensors might not have been designed to detect. The way her body moved in predictable patterns. The tiny electrical signals that preceded each motion. The almost imperceptible sound of her servos engaging before she struck. He said nothing. But he remembered. The intelligence test came next. A complex puzzle was presented. A three-dimensional navigation problem involving stellar coordinates, gravitational fields, and energy requirements. The Veltraxian competitor, a specialist named Verdok, solved it in 4.7 seconds. His neural processor had simply calculated all possible solutions and selected the optimal one. Samuel studied the same puzzle. He did not have a computer in his brain. He could not calculate millions of possibilities per second. But something else happened as he looked at the star chart. He saw patterns. Not through calculation, but through intuition. His organic brain evolved over millions of years to recognize patterns in nature, did something no algorithm could replicate. It felt the answer. That way, Samuel said, pointing to a route through the stars. He had taken 30 seconds to provide his answer. Verdoc checked Samuel's solution against his own calculations. They matched. The human had arrived at the same answer through a process the Veltraxian could not understand or replicate. "How did you do that?" Verdoc asked, his voice carrying genuine confusion. "You do not have the processing power to calculate the optimal route." Samuel smiled. "I didn't calculate it. I just... knew." The Veltraxians had no response to this. Their systems were not designed to process the concept of intuition. They moved on to the final test. Combat, the arena was cleared. Specialist Miratek stood on one side, her weapon systems powered down to non-lethal settings, her combat protocols loaded and ready. Opposite her stood Derek, holding only a simple training blade. "This is hardly fair," Miratek said. Her voice came from speakers set into her throat. "My reaction time is 50 times faster than yours. My strength is 10 times greater. My combat database contains 10 million recorded engagements." Derek settled into a relaxed stance. "Sounds like you have the advantage. I will attempt to calibrate my responses to avoid causing permanent damage." "I appreciate that." Gelvorin gave the signal to begin. Miratek moved at mechanical speed. Her blade a blur aimed at Derek's center mass. Her targeting computer had already calculated where he would be, how he would react, and how to counter his counter. Derek was not there. He had moved a fraction of a second before her strike, shifting his weight in a way her calculations had not predicted. His eyes had seen something in the tension of her servos, in the angle of her optical sensors that told him where she would strike before she moved. Miratek adjusted. She launched a combination of attacks, each one calculated to anticipate human reaction speeds and intercept any possible dodge. Derek flowed around them like water. He did not try to match her speed or strength. Instead, he redirected her attacks, using her own momentum against her. When she struck, he was already somewhere else. When she pressed forward, he gave ground and let her overextend. The match continued for 11 minutes. Miratek landed several hits. Her superior speed and strength gave her clear advantages. Derek took damage. He bled from cuts on his arms and face. One strike bruised his ribs so badly he could barely breathe. But he did not stop every time Miratek knocked him down. He got back up. Every time her systems registered what should have been a decisive blow, he adapted and continued fighting. His body was damaged, but his eyes remained focused. Watching her, learning her patterns, waiting. Then Miratek's power reserves dropped below the critical level. Her movements slowed as her systems began to ration energy. Her reflexes, once 50 times faster than human, dropped to merely 10 times faster. Then 5. Derek waited until the moment was right. Then he moved inside her guard, past her slowing defenses, and placed his training blade against the housing of her primary processor, Miratek said. The arena fell silent. General Thaxter stepped forward, his optical array cycling through different spectrums as if searching for some explanation. "How?" he demanded. "Your biology is inferior in every measurable way." Derek wiped blood from his face. He was breathing hard. His body was screaming with pain. But he was still standing. "You're probably right," he said. "But here's the thing about humans. We don't know when to quit." He paused, looking at Miratek, who stood frozen in place as her systems tried to process what had just happened. "You can calculate faster than me. You can hit harder. You can move quicker. But you can only do those things as long as your power lasts." Derek smiled through bloody teeth. "I can hurt forever. I can fight until my heart stops. And even then, I might get up one more time just to make a point." Samuel approached Miratek with a medical kit. Without hesitation, he began checking her systems, making sure nothing had been damaged. Kelvorn watched in confusion. "What is he doing?" "Making sure she's okay," Lisa explained. "She fought well. She deserves respect. but she was your opponent. That doesn't mean we want her hurt. The concept seemed to create an error in Kelveran's processors. Care for a defeated enemy. Respect for someone who had just tried to harm them. His databases contained no protocols for understanding such behavior. For the first time since, the Veltraxians had achieved technological superiority. Ambassador Kelvoran felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Uncertainty. The station had been quiet for several hours after the demonstration. The Veltraxians had retreated to their section to analyze what they had witnessed. The humans had returned to their quarters to rest and treat. Derek's injuries. Lisa sat with Derek in the medical bay while Samuel applied healing patches to his wounds. The cuts were not deep, but his ribs would take time to recover. He winced as Samuel pressed a patch against his side. "That was stupid," Lisa said, but her voice was gentle. "You could have been seriously hurt." "I was seriously hurt," Derek replied with a grim smile. "But it was worth it." "Did you see their faces when Miratech yielded? They didn't know what to think." Samuel sealed the last patch and stepped back. "You made a point. Whether they understood it is another question. They'll understand eventually," Derek said. "Or they won't. Either way, they know we're not going to roll over for them." The station intercom crackled to life. A Veltraxian voice, flat and mechanical, spoke in the common trade language. "Attention, all. Personnel. Environmental alert in Sector 7. Atmosphere leak detected. Emergency protocols engaged." Lisa stood immediately. "That doesn't sound routine." "It's not our section," Samuel said. "We should probably stay here and let them handle it." The intercom crackled again. "All Veltraxian personnel are advised to avoid Sector 7. Temperature readings indicate rapid heat loss. Survival probability for enhanced individuals is 12.7%. Lisa was already moving toward the door. Lisa, Samuel called after her. "What are you doing?" 12% survival probability, she said, without stopping. "That means someone's trapped in there." Derek pushed himself off the medical bed, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "I'm coming with you. You're injured. I can still walk. I can still help." Samuel grabbed a medical kit and followed them both. "This is crazy. You know that, right?" "Probably," Lisa said. "But if there are people dying over there, we can't just sit here and do nothing." They moved quickly through the station corridors. Other humans joined them along the way. Maria Santos, still sore from her own demonstration, and 3 crew members named Jacob, Amy, and Carlos. None of them asked questions. They simply fell into step behind their captain. The entrance to Sector 7 was blocked by a heavy airlock door. A group of Veltraxian security officers stood nearby, their sensors scanning the sector beyond. General Thaxter was among them, his massive frame immobile as he processed data. "What's the situation?" Lisa asked as she approached. Thaxter turned to face her. 3 of our technicians were performing maintenance when the cascade failure occurred. They are trapped approximately 200 meters inside the sector. Atmosphere is venting. Temperature has dropped to -40 degrees and is still falling, so go get them." "Impossible. Our cybernetic systems cannot function in such conditions. The cold will destroy our electronics. Our power cells will drain too quickly. Any rescue attempt would result in additional casualties." Lisa stared at him. "So you're just going to leave them there to die?" "We have calculated all possible scenarios." Thaxter's voice carried no emotion. "There is no path to successful rescue that does not result in unacceptable losses. The logical choice is to accept the loss of 3 personnel rather than risk losing more. That's insane. That is mathematics." Lisa turned to her team. They looked back at her, waiting. Not one of them seemed surprised by what she was about to say. "Emergency suits," she ordered. "Now," Thaxter stepped forward. "Captain Grant, I must advise against this action. Your species is even less equipped to survive those conditions than ours. You will die." "Maybe," Lisa said as she pulled on her suit. "But at least we'll die trying." The airlock opened and the humans stepped through. The cold hit them immediately, even through their suits. The air was thin and getting thinner as atmosphere continued to vent through the damaged sections. Warning lights flashed everywhere, casting everything in red. Frost had already formed on the walls and floor. Lisa led the way, her suit's lights cutting through the darkness. Behind her, the others followed in single file. Their breath came in clouds that froze almost instantly. Suit temperature dropping, Samuel reported. We have maybe 15 minutes before these suits fail completely. Then we move fast, Lisa replied. They pushed deeper into the sector. The temperature continued to fall. Ice formed on their visors. Their joints began to stiffen as the cold worked its way through their suits. Derek stumbled, his injured ribs making it hard to breathe in the thin air. Maria grabbed his arm and steadied him. They kept moving. 10 minutes in, they found the first technician. He was young, his optical sensors frozen solid, his body curled against a wall. He was still alive, but his systems were in emergency shutdown, preserving whatever power remained. Can you carry him? Lisa asked Carlos. Carlos looked at the Veltraxian. The alien was heavy, his body loaded with metal and machinery. But Carlos nodded and bent down to lift him. I'll manage. They found the other two 50 meters further in. One was completely unresponsive, his core processor in emergency mode. The other was still conscious but panicking, his cognitive implants generating cascading errors as they struggled to process the impossible situation. Derek grabbed the panicking Veltraxian by the shoulders. His hands were shaking from the cold, and he could barely feel his fingers, but he held on. Look at me, Derek said, his voice steady despite his chattering teeth. Focus on my voice. What's your name? The Veltraxian's optical sensors flickered. I am ... Technician Relver? Okay, Relver. I'm Derek. We're going to get you out of here. All of us. But I need you to help me carry your friend. Can you do that? Relver systems ran probability calculations. Every analysis said they were going to die. There was no logical reason to trust this fragile organic creature. No data suggested that following his instructions would improve survival odds. But something in Derek's eyes, something no sensor could measure, made Relver nod. I will try. Together. They lifted the unconscious technician. Lisa and Maria supported Carlos as he carried the first one. Samuel and the others formed a protective line around them, watching for any new dangers. They started back toward the airlock. The walk back was the longest of Lisa's life. Her suit's heating system had failed completely. Her fingers were numb. Her face burned with cold. Every breath felt like swallowing ice. Jacob collapsed twice. Each time they picked him up and kept moving. Amy's suit began venting atmosphere, and she had to share Carlos's oxygen supply. Carlos himself was moving on nothing but determination, the Veltraxian on his back weighing him down with every step. When they finally reached the airlock, Lisa could barely move her fingers to enter the code. Derek had to do it for her, his hands shaking so badly that it took 3 attempts. The airlock opened. Warm air rushed over them. They made it out. The medical teams were waiting. Veltraxian doctors rushed to attend to their own people while human medics surrounded the rescue team. Lisa collapsed the moment she was through the door, her core temperature dangerously low. Maria had lost 2 fingers to frostbite. Derek's ribs had cracked further from the strain. Carlos would need weeks of therapy before he could walk properly again. Amy and Jacob were both suffering from severe hypothermia, but everyone was alive. General Thaxter stood at the edge of the medical area, watching the chaos with sensors that could detect every vital sign, every injury, every cost the humans had paid for this rescue. When Lisa's temperature had stabilized enough for her to speak, he approached her bed. Why? He asked. The probability of success was negligible. The cost to yourselves was enormous. We had given you no reason for such sacrifice. We spent yesterday demonstrating our superiority. We made clear that we considered you inferior beings. Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. You needed help. That is not a sufficient reason to risk your lives. Lisa managed a weak smile. It's the only reason we need. Thaxter stood in silence for a long moment. His processors, designed for combat and calculation, had no framework for understanding what he was seeing. These fragile creatures had nearly killed themselves to save people who had treated them with contempt. I do not understand your species, he said finally. That's okay, Lisa replied. Most species don't. But maybe someday you will. Across the medical bay, technician Relver was watching Derek receive treatment. The human who had pulled him from the darkness, who had looked him in the eye and promised him survival against all logic for the first time in his life. Relver felt something his cybernetic implants could not explain or control: gratitude. 3 days passed after the rescue. The humans remained in the medical bay, slowly recovering from their injuries. The Veltraxians continued their normal operations, but something had changed in the way they moved through the station. There was uncertainty in their steps, confusion in their glowing optical sensors. Ambassador Kelvoran spent those 3 days in his quarters analyzing data. He reviewed the rescue footage hundreds of times. He ran simulations trying to predict the humans' decision to enter Sector 7. Every model told him the same thing. No rational being would have made that choice. The risk was too high, the probability of success too low. The potential cost too great, and yet the humans had done it anyway. On the 4th day, Kelvoran went to the human medical bay. He found Lisa sitting up in her bed, reading something on a small portable screen. Her color had returned, and the medical systems had repaired most of the damage from the cold. But her fingers were still bandaged where frostbite had caused tissue damage. May I speak with you? Kelvoran asked. Lisa looked up. Pull up a chair. There were no chairs designed for Veltraxian bodies, so the ambassador simply stood at the foot of her bed, his chrome hands folded behind his back. I've been attempting to understand your actions, he began. I have run every analysis my processors are capable of. I have consulted the historical databases of 17 different civilizations. I have spoken with our psychologists and behavioral specialists, and I have found no explanation that satisfies me. Lisa set down her screen. What exactly are you trying to explain? Everything. Kelvoran's optical sensors dimmed slightly, a sign of deep processing. The combat demonstration, where your Commander Cole fought until his body was failing rather than surrender? The rescue, Watower. Ere you led your people into conditions that should have killed you all. The way Dr. Park cared for Specialist Miratek after she had tried to harm him. He paused. The way you smile at me now, even though I spent our first meeting treating you as an inferior species. Lisa considered his words carefully. What explanation have you been looking for? A logical one. A strategic advantage that motivated your actions. A hidden technology that gave you confidence. Some form of rational self-interest that my systems could process and understand. You haven't found any of those things. No, your actions appear to defy all rational analysis. Lisa swung her legs over the side of her bed and faced him directly. Her green eyes met his optical sensors. Ambassador, have you ever heard of something called the human spirit? I have encountered the term. It appears in many of your species' cultural documents. I had assumed it was a metaphorical concept with no practical application. It's not metaphorical. It's the most real thing about us. Kelvoran waited for her to continue. Humans evolved on a dangerous world, Lisa said. We were small and weak compared to many of the creatures around us. We had no claws, no fangs, no armor. Our ancestors should have gone extinct 100 times over. And yet you survived. You did more than survive. We thrived. We spread across our entire planet into every environment, no matter how harsh. We crossed oceans without knowing what was on the other side. We climbed mountains just to see what the view looked like. We went to our moon because it was there. Lisa stood up, walking slowly to the window that looked out at the stars. And we did all of that not because it was logical. Not because the risk-reward calculations made sense. We did it because something inside us refuses to accept limits. Something that says no matter how impossible the odds, we have to try. That sounds like a design flaw, Kelvoran said. Lisa laughed. It was a warm sound, genuine and unforced. Maybe it is, but it's our design flaw. And it's the reason we're standing here today, talking to you. The ambassador processed this. His systems tried to categorize the human spirit as a variable, something that could be measured and predicted. But every formula he constructed fell apart when applied to actual human behavior. In the rescue, Kelverin said slowly, "You knew you might die." "Yes, but you went anyway." "Yes, because our people needed help." "Yes, even though we had treated you poorly." "Doesn't matter." Lisa turned to face him. "When someone is in trouble, you help them. It's that simple." "It is not simple to us." Kelveron's voice carried something that might have been frustration in an organic being. "We make decisions based on logic, on probability, on rational analysis of costs and benefits, and that served you well. You've built an amazing civilization. Your technology is incredible. You've achieved things humanity can only dream of. Then why do I feel like we are missing something?" The question surprised both of them. Kelveron had not intended to ask it. His vocal systems had operated faster than his processing centers could control. Lisa studied him for a long moment. "What happened to your original body, Ambassador?" The question was unexpected. "I was enhanced beginning at birth, as all Veltraxians are. My organic components were replaced gradually over my first 40 years until I reached my current configuration. Do you remember what it felt like before the enhancements?" Kelveron searched his memory banks. The early data was corrupted, incomplete, stored in formats his current processors could not easily read. But fragments remained. "I remember ... sensations. Warmth, cold, a racing heart when I was frightened, a strange feeling in my stomach when I was excited, and now I process data. My sensors tell me the temperature of a room. My systems inform me of potential threats. But there is no..." He struggled to find the word. "There is no feeling." Lisa nodded. "That's what you're missing." She walked back to her bed and sat down, facing him with an expression he could not categorize. "We chose not to replace our bodies because we didn't want to lose the feelings. The pain? Yes, but also the joy. The fear, but also the hope. We're inefficient and fragile, and we make terrible decisions based on emotions rather than logic. But we can also love someone so much that we'll walk through fire for them. We can feel hope so strong that we'll fight against impossible odds. We can experience joy so pure that it makes every moment of suffering worth it." Kelveron stood in silence, processing her words. Something was happening in his cognitive centers, something his diagnostics could not identify. It felt almost like the corrupted memories of his organic childhood, but sharper, more immediate. "When your Commander Cole fought Specialist Miratek," Kelveron said, "he did not stop even when he was bleeding and broken. Was that the human spirit?" "Part of it. And when you entered the frozen sector to save our people, knowing you might die?" "That too. And when you smile at me now, despite everything?" Lisa reached out and touched his metal hand. The gesture was meaningless to his sensors. He could not feel her warmth or the texture of her skin. But somehow, impossibly, something in his consciousness registered the moment as significant. "Ambassador," she said, "the human spirit isn't just about being stubborn or brave. It's about connection, about caring for other beings even when it doesn't make sense, about reaching across differences and finding something worth preserving." She squeezed his hand. "You haven't lost the capacity for that. You've just forgotten it's there." Kelverin looked down at her small organic hand resting on his chrome fingers. His processors ran through every interaction he had observed between humans since their arrival. The way they supported each other. The way they laughed and worried and hoped together. The way they had risked everything for strangers who had shown them nothing but contempt. For the first time in his long existence, Ambassador Kelveron felt something his systems could not analyze, a desire to change. "I must speak with my superiors," he said quietly. "I believe our assessment of humanity needs to be revised." Lisa smiled. "Take your time. We're not going anywhere." As Kelveron left the medical bay, he passed Technician Relver in the corridor. The young Veltraxian had been coming to visit the humans every day since the rescue. Bringing them reports and small gifts from his culture, he had started smiling when he saw them. It was a strange expression on a partly mechanical face, but it was unmistakably a smile. Kelvorn paused to watch him for a moment. Then, for the first time in 300 years, the ambassador attempted to smile as well. His chrome face was not designed for the expression. It looked wrong, almost frightening, but it was a start. 6 months had passed since the humans first arrived at the neutral station. In that time, everything had changed. Ambassador Kelvoran stood before the Galactic Council, the governing body that represented over 100 species from across the known galaxy. The chamber was enormous, filled with beings of every shape and size. Some were organic, some synthetic, and many were somewhere in between. All of them had come to hear the Veltraxian ambassador's report on humanity. When we first encountered the humans, Kelvoran began, we believed them to be a primitive species. They had achieved interstellar travel without significant cybernetic enhancement. Their bodies were fragile. Their technology was basic. By every measure we use to evaluate civilizations, they ranked near the bottom. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Many of the assembled delegates had heard similar assessments before. Organic species rarely impress the more advanced civilizations. We were wrong, Kelvoran said. The chamber fell silent. He tested them in demonstrations of strength, speed, intelligence, and combat ability. In raw performance, they fell short of our standards in every category. Their bodies are weaker than ours. Their minds process information more slowly. Their reflexes are inadequate compared to enhanced beings. Kelvoran paused, his optical sensors scanning the assembled delegates, and yet, when one of their warriors fought our finest combat specialist, he refused to surrender even when his body was broken and bleeding. He endured pain that would have shut down any of our systems. He waited, adapted, and found victory not through superior capability, but through sheer determination. The delegates leaned forward, intrigued. When an emergency struck our station, when 3 of our people were trapped in conditions that would kill any enhanced being, the humans did not hesitate. They walked into that frozen darkness, knowing they might die. They saved our people at enormous cost to themselves. Kelvoran's voice carried something new, something that his vocal processors had not been programmed to express emotion. They did this not because we had earned their loyalty, not because there was strategic benefit, not because logic demanded it. They did it because someone was in danger and they could help. He turned to face a section of the chamber where the human delegation sat. Liz. A Grant was there, fully recovered from her injuries. Derek Cole sat beside her, his ribs healed, but still bearing the scars of his fight with Meritek. Samuel Park, Maria Santos, and the others who had participated in the rescue were all present. We Veltraxians have spent 3,000 years upgrading ourselves, Kelvoran continued. We believed that our biological forms were weaknesses to be overcome. We replaced our hearts with pumps because hearts can fail. We replaced our muscles with machines because muscles grow tired. We replaced our emotions with logic because emotions are unpredictable. He looked at his chrome hands, the same hands that had served him for centuries. But in removing our weaknesses, we removed something else, something we did not know we were losing. We removed the ability to feel, to care, to hope, to love. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the synthetic beings, those who had never possessed biological forms, were processing Kelvoran's words with intense focus. The humans have a concept they call the human spirit. I have spent 6 months trying to understand it. I have analyzed their behavior, studied their history, and spoken with their philosophers and leaders. Kelvoran faced the council directly. The human spirit is not a technology we can replicate. It is not a resource we can harvest. It is something that exists because humans chose to remain imperfect. They feel pain so they can appreciate joy. They experience fear so they can know courage. They face death so they can truly value life. He gestured toward the human delegation. These beings are small and brief and fragile. Their lives last barely a century. Their bodies can be destroyed by things that would not even inconvenience an enhanced being. By every rational measure, they should be at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. Kelvoran's voice strengthened. But they are not. because they possess something none of our enhancements can match. They possess the ability to reach beyond their limitations, to fight when logic says surrender, to hope when reason says despair, to love even when it costs them everything. He turned back to the council. I came here today to recommend that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, not as a junior species to be protected and guided, but as equals. Because while we have much to teach them about technology and science, they have something far more important to teach us. And what is that? The question came from a delegate whose species had been synthetic since before the Veltraxians discovered fire. Kelvorin looked at Lisa Grant. She smiled at him. That warm human expression that his sensors could not measure, but his consciousness could somehow feel. They can teach us how to be alive again, he said. The vote was not unanimous. Some species remained skeptical. Others feared what humanity might become with access to galactic technology. But when the final count was taken, humanity had been accepted into the council by a comfortable margin. The celebration afterward was small and informal. The human delegation gathered in their quarters with a few Veltraxian friends they had made during their stay. Technician Relver was there, smiling his strange mechanical smile. Specialist Miratek had come as well. Still struggling to understand how, Derek had defeated her, but respecting him for it. Derek raised a glass of something the station's fabricators had attempted to create, based on human specifications. It tasted almost like champagne. 2 new friends, he said. 2 new friends, the others echoed. Kelvorin stood at the edge of the gathering, watching the humans interact with his people. Something was happening among the Veltraxians that had not happened in thousands of years. A small movement had begun, citizens choosing to restore biological components to their bodies. Not abandoning technology, but remembering what it meant to feel. Relver had been among the first. He had restored nerve endings to his hands so he could experience touch again. He described the sensation of holding someone's hand as the most extraordinary experience of his existence. Lisa approached Kelvorin with 2 glasses. She offered him one. I don't have the systems to process this, he said. I know, but you can hold it anyway. He took the glass. The liquid inside reflected the station lights. Ambassador, Lisa said, can I ask you something? Of course. When you spoke to the council today, you said, we taught you how to be alive again. But you've been alive this whole time. All those centuries, all those achievements, that was you being alive. Kelvorin considered her words. I suppose that is true, but there is a difference between existing and truly living. I existed for 300 years. Efficient, logical, productive, but I cannot remember the last time I felt joy, or hope, or wonder. He looked at the glass in his hand. Your species reminds me of what those things felt like. Even though I can no longer experience them directly, watching you experience them gives me something. A memory of feeling, perhaps, or a hope that feeling might return. Lisa touched his arm. It will. Give it time. Across the room, Derek was teaching Miratek how to play a card game. She was terrible at it, her combat protocols completely useless for understanding the random nature of the cards. But she was laughing, sound her vocal processors had not made in decades. Samuel was deep in conversation with a Veltraxian, scientist about the nature of intuition and whether it could be programmed. Maria was showing Relver pictures from Earth, explaining the concept of beaches and oceans. Kelvorin watched it all with sensors that could detect every photon of light, every vibration of sound, every chemical compound in the air. But for the first time in his long existence, he was not processing data. He was simply being present, simply existing in the moment. Simply alive, Ambassador, Lisa said. What happens now? For your people, I mean? Kelvorin looked out at the stars visible through the station windows. Countless worlds, countless species, countless possibilities. I do not know, he admitted. Change will not come quickly. Many of my people still believe that organic emotions are weaknesses. They will resist. But the change has begun, and it cannot be stopped. He turned to face her. A species did something no technology ever could. You reminded us of what we used to be, what we gave up in the name of progress. And you showed us that it is possible to be both strong and compassionate, both logical and loving, both advanced and alive. Lisa smiled. We're not perfect. We make mistakes all the time. We hurt each other and ourselves. We do stupid things for stupid reasons. Kelvin agreed. But you also forgive. You also hope. You also try again. He raised his glass, even though he could not drink. To humanity, he said. Small, brief, fragile, and absolutely extraordinary. Lisa raised her glass to meet his. To new understanding. They stood together in silence, watching as their two species began to learn from each other. The humans were already asking questions about Veltraxian technology, eager to learn and grow. The Veltraxians were watching the humans with something that looked almost like wonder. Outside, the stars burned cold and bright, witnesses to a moment that would change both civilizations forever. The humans had come to the galactic stage expecting to find their place in a hierarchy. Instead, they had taught the universe that there was no hierarchy. Just beings trying to understand each other, reaching across the void to find connection. It was messy and inefficient, and completely illogical. It was perfectly human, and somehow, impossibly, it was exactly what the galaxy needed.